All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1 o'clock and we are going to get started. My name is Natalie Beanie, and I am the Deputy Director of the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility here at the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, where we manage the government-wide implementation of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So today, we are going to do a conversation on leading diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility from where you are. But before we get started, let me go over a couple of things. So my pronouns are she, her. I am an African American female with green glasses and a bright smile and shoulder length sister locks, and I'm working from home today. The visual description for those of you who may not be able to visually see me. For those of you who would like closed captioning, you can connect to that through the registration portal that you received to participate in today's event. On another note, the slides post this event will be posted in that same space. So anyone who would like a copy of the slides that I'm going to go through, you can access them in your registration portal. Also, if we go along and you have any administration questions, can't hear, something's wrong with your slides, you're not able to connect, we ask that you email benefits@opm.gov. So benefits@opm.gov. Again, the slides will be made available in the registration portal or through the registration portal after today's presentation. It's going to be a lot of conversation, so I'm going to get started. We will ask that you place your questions in the Q&A rather than the chat feature, because I can only see one screen at a time. So please use the Q&A feature for your questions. And with that, we'll get started. So I'm going to give an overview today, a level set. We're going to talk a lot about the executive order. Then we're going to talk about the implementation of the executive order, and then actions for DEIA impact. Those are the areas that will probably be more like, what can you do now? But before I get into it, I typically give this presentation to D&I offices or DEIA offices, but I feel like that's not who I'm talking to today. So I'm not familiar with the benefits world. So if everyone could take a moment and just tell us, if we were in the chat function, not in the chat, in the Q&A, because I can't, well, wait a minute, let me see, I can see this. In the chat, I want everyone to tell me, who are you? Who is in the room? Give me your title. What do you do all day? And yes, I'm going to wait until I start to see them populate. So for those of you who were not ready to participate, now is the time. I will be calling on folks as I see them. Anyone in the chat? I don't see one. How about in the Q&A? Anyone want to tell me where they're coming from, or what would they do? Like, or just a benefits officer? What organizations do you represent? I don't see anyone. All right, well, I'm going to assume that most of the people on the call today are benefits officers in federal agencies. With that being the assumption, since I don't have anyone in the chat, we're going to
Natalie, I think you can scroll down and see the responses.
Oh, I'm not scrolling down. It's me. Hold on. My chat, well, maybe it is my chat.
It's the Q&A.
Oh, I was looking in the chat, so let me scroll down in the Q&A. Thank you, Patricia. I thought I was all by myself. Thank you. Benefits and retirement specialist. So now we can keep going. Thank you. Now I can see it. It was my fault. Human resource specialist. Okay. Oh, my scroll button won't allow me to. There we go. So mostly HR specialists. human resource officers, administrative assistants, okay, benefits. All right, so benefits, HR assistants, HR specialists. So mostly human resources fields. Great. And that's good for me to know so I can try to make things a little bit more relatable to you as we get into the conversation. Paralegal specialists. Okay. Oh, wow. See, I thought I was talking to myself and all of you are participating. Thank you. Texas State Office. Okay. Now, super, VA. Okay. DOT and DLA. Okay. Great. USDA. I used to work at USDA. Okay. OPM benefits and works. Hi, Denise. Well, we have a lot of slides to get through. So thank you all for participating right from the top, me figuring it out. But it's good to know who's in the room. So level set. Just to be clear, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility typically is known in the federal government or in the workspace as just diversity and inclusion previously. It started with, in 2011, with the executive order from the Obama administration. And so I didn't want to start this conversation without saying that diversity and inclusion has been in the federal workforce for about a decade. And there has been some great strides in workplace initiatives or benefits or extensions of equity across organizations around who's getting professional development, who's participating in mentoring. We've had this kind of coordinated effort for diversity and inclusion for a decade, right? And so what this is, what the new EO, the new Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility EO is a next level type thing. So I don't want many of you to think that we're starting from ground zero. We have talked about diversity and inclusion. We have different levels, different understandings even sometimes of what diversity and inclusion is across the federal workforce. So we want to start with that and say from here moving forward, we kind of want to level set, make some definitions, establish some priorities, and really make this a coordinated effort, not just across government, but across your organization. So let's start with some of the things that I was talking about. We, as the federal government, we're the largest employer in the United States, right? And so we have to be the model for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. People are looking at us. The private sector looks at what we do, academia, international corporations, everyone looks at us. And so we should be the model for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. The other fact of the matter is the federal senior executive service is 77% white, 65% male, and 8% individuals with disabilities. All of those are just straight facts, and some of them are fine. When we compare them to other factors like the civilian labor force and other workforce data is where we're like, are we equitably distributing our resources? Do we have participation from multiple communities in the workforce? How do we make sure that the federal government is a model for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility? So I just talked a little bit about that in our level set. D&I is moving to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So it's not that we're getting rid of diversity. It's not that we're getting rid of inclusion. It's we're adding equity and accessibility. Doesn't mean that we haven't had programs and initiatives that provided equity or focused on accessibility. Now we want them to all be elevated to the same status. So it's diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. To go over a few definitions, I like to keep things simple, right? So diversity is just the inclusion of many communities, right? And we can go off and say identities, races, ethnicities, backgrounds, abilities, cultures, beliefs, and those underserved communities. But the definition is just the inclusion of many communities. Equity. Equity is the consistent and systemic, fair, just, and impartial treatment of all, including individuals who belong to underserved communities. So as you can see, it's that theme of making sure that we're the most inclusive, particularly of those who have been underserved. is highlighted. Inclusion. This is the recognition, appreciation, and use of the talents and skills of our employees of all backgrounds. Very simple, but it's all about making sure that our employees belong and feel like they belong, right? And can be unique at the same time, and that they're recognized, appreciated, and their talents are used as they're being, unique and they belong. So it's all together. We have to make sure we keep those connected. Accessibility. Now, this is something that I think, I started my career in the federal sector as a disability program manager. So this is my background. Accessibility is one of those things that has been a compliance issue for the most part. Not everywhere. A lot of places have really pushed for disability inclusion and making sure that employees with disabilities are a focus of their organization. But for the most part, we've had this steady but slow trend when it comes to hiring individuals with disabilities, retaining individuals with disabilities. And so it's always been a part of our culture, 30 years, if not for more. It was definitely more. But the design, construction, development, and maintenance of facilities, right? Information and communication technology, any programs, any services that we deliver, it's making sure that all people can fully and independently access and use anything that we create. And so this is inclusive of people with disabilities. And so it really is a mind shift from we're doing this for people with disabilities to everything that we do should be for everyone. And again, it goes back to the many communities. It goes back to making sure that those that have been underserved or not participated previously have access, right, to the federal workforce. So one of the topics I get all the time is when we say historically underserved communities. This list is pretty exhaustive. Like, it's a full list. I think everyone can see themselves in this somewhere, right? So when we talk about historically underserved communities and making sure that we have a workforce that includes many communities, we wanted to make sure that it includes people of color, individuals in rural communities, older adults, women, individuals facing religious discrimination, formerly incarcerated individuals, first-generation professionals, college students, immigrants, people with disabilities, LGBTQ plus individuals, individuals with limited English proficiency, veterans, military spouse, parents, caregivers, individuals facing pregnancy discrimination, persons adversely impacted by persistent poverty, discrimination, or inequality. I think everyone can see themselves in what we call historically underserved communities. So let's talk about the executive order on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the federal workforce. On day one, the administration issued an executive order on equity EO, racial equity EO, and it's about affirmatively advancing equity, civil rights, racial justice, and equal opportunity, but in the way that we as the government serve the American people. So the outcomes to that is advancing equity, right, for underserved communities using principally their outward-facing policies and programs and tools. And many of us already are in, I think it's our 200-day equity report is due. So many agencies are already fully into the outward-facing policy and program equity initiatives. On June 25th, the DEIA EO was issued by the administration. And this one advances diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the federal workforce so that we then can deliver equitable outcomes. So the outcome there is when when we have a workforce that draws on all segments of society and leverage our inward-facing employment policies and practices to provide us, public servants, at all levels, that means from senior leaders to our GS entry-level employees, with the lower GS5 or entry-level employees, at all levels, right, with need an equal opportunity to succeed and to lead. So those are the differences in the two EOs. And so one is outward facing, the EO, the DEIA EO is inward facing and focuses on the federal workforce. Now, here's the part, this is my favorite slide. And we had a slide deck that had full of images that were not 508 compliant. And so we had to make sure that we remove those. And so it kind of takes away the visual beauty of this slide, but I'm going to try to reimagine it for you all as a visual image that's not on the slide. So the one thing that I think is very clear is that the administration is serious about advancing equity, and that they have made it known that it has to engage all parts of an agency, right? And so I like to think of it in 3 buckets. Right? So keep it real simple, just 3 buckets: people, culture, and mission. Okay? So in the DEIA EO covers people and culture of the federal workforce. The mission part is the equity EO, which covers how we are equitably reaching our customers, which is the American people, right? So people, culture, and mission. So when people ask, what is the federal government doing for DEIA, for the workforce? People and culture. Their focus is on people and culture. If they say, what are we doing for the American people? It's the equity EO. And we are focused on making sure that we equitably distribute all of our services and benefits to the American people. That's our mission. People, culture, mission. Again, we wanted to move away from, most of you work in federal agencies where D&I was the responsibility of the D&I office, right? That's what they do. They're holding the program, they're having the observance, they're doing this initiative, right? This is beyond that. This is a government-wide approach to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. It's involving all parts of the federal workforce, It's being led by OPM and OMB, which is Office of Management and Budget, in partnership with the White House and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And the EO first charges agencies with a 100-day assessment as a first and initial due-out. And I'll get to some of the different key deadlines, but just wanted to make everyone aware is that first assignment is saying, give us the current state of your diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the workforce. Our government is big and broad, and it's interesting that, to really have a good look, it's going to be different in every location. It's going to be different for every organization because it's real local. It's real everyday. How do we get along in the workforce? It's really, how are we making sure that what we do provides the best service to everyone that we serve in America, right? So, we're asked to identify any barriers to our success that federal employees face and are members of underserved communities in 100 days. We're also asking agencies to take a look and to seek opportunities, right, to establish a senior official to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the workforce. And we'll be giving out additional guidance on that. So the EO covers a multitude of areas. I will tell you, it's one of the longer ones I've ever had to read. And so what I've done here in the next probably 10 slides is go through kind of the highlight of the areas. I won't go into detail on many of them because we have many other things to talk about, but understand that the top lines, are important. So one of the things that are important is building a diverse pipeline into public service. And in order to do that, we're going to look at new recruitment partnerships. And we're also going to look at how to expand or increase employment of formerly incarcerated individuals into the federal government. Another issue that's a top line is pay equity, making sure that we have fair compensation and that we reduce, this is the good one, reduce the reliance on unpaid internships. A lot of individuals who have responsibilities, financial responsibilities, are not able to take on an unpaid internship where sometimes you can gain some valuable on-the-job experience, be it virtual or in person, and it gives you familiarity, right, with the federal workforce and the lexicon, and you get to network and meet people. But if you're not able to participate in an unpaid internship because you got bills, right? You got to be able to pay those. You need a paid internship. We have to increase paid internships and reduce the reliance on unpaid internships to have that fair and equitable opportunity for individuals who are coming into the workforce to have experience with the federal workforce, right? So that's one. Equity for LGBTQ plus public servants. So this is where we talk about promoting equitable access to health coverage and care for LGBTQ employees and their dependents, right? We're going to be looking at benefits like sick leave and insurance and things of that nature to equitably serve families with diverse family structures. We're going to look and make sure that we have gender identities accurately reflected and identified in the workplace, looking at gender markers, when we use them, do we need to use them, and pronouns in the federal employment process, directs all agencies to consider taking steps to expand access to gender-neutral facilities in federal workspaces. And we're also going to be looking at revising our transgender guidance, and making sure that, we'll have a workforce inclusive of those who are transgender and gender nonconforming and non-binary employees who may wish to legally, medically, or socially transition. So that is the top line as well. Sorry. Equity for individuals with disabilities. That's what I was talking about with the accessibility portion. Here we're going to look at, OPM and the EEOC, including the Department of Labor and the Access Board, are going to coordinate across the government to provide federal workplaces and technologies that are accessible, right? Improve the process for requesting reasonable accommodations at the agency level, support, employees in understanding their rights to request reasonable accommodations, which includes religious accommodations. We're going to review Schedule A hiring authority for individuals with certain disabilities. And we're going to take some steps to expand the workforce recruitment program for college disabilities. And if you're not familiar with any of these terms, because I know this isn't where you live most of the time, feel free, once you get the slides, to just Google workforce recruitment program, Schedule A, contact the disability program manager at your organization and say, hey, tell me a little bit more about this. They are wealth and resource of information. Equity-focused training and development. This is another top line. So we're going to start looking at professional development. Who's participating? A lot of times we have great programs at the agency level or department level, but we haven't done a good job of tracking demographic information, like who's actually participating, who's applying, who's participating, are they being promoted afterwards? Again, all about, are we including many communities, right? And so again, many communities, when I say that, goes back to that list of underserved that really covers the bulk of our workforce. DEIA training. So during the last administration, I noticed there was an email went out regarding the CSER assist of certain types of training, DEI. And it had a chilling effect. It really did on when agencies were like, oh, when do we start back up? And we gave them day one, we said we rescinded that order, and the White House did. And, training could commence again in D&I. But now we're saying DEIA training. And so we're going to send out some guidance to agencies on how to make sure that we provide, training that builds skill sets, that promote respectful and inclusive workplaces. Implicit and unconscious bias is just one of many topics that can be can be a part of a DEIA education program. And so we really want to make sure that public servants receive the best type of training so that they can serve the American people and the diverse communities that make up our country. A safe workplace. That's another top line. So workplace harassment and gender-based, gender-based violence will also be a part of this. Is also a part of this EO. Will be a part of our guidance moving forward. A data-driven approach. So this is important. We like to make sure that when we make a decision to move forward and use the government's resources, that we look at data to say that because of this, we're doing this, And so we really want to make sure we have an evidence-based and informed approach to reducing barriers in hiring, promotion, professional development, and retention practices. But if you go back to that underserved communities list, I'm driving this screen, so I can go back. For those of you who that makes your stomach sick, I'm sorry. Historically underserved communities, right? So if you look at this list right now, most of our agencies do not collect information in these categories in the workforce. So right now, I think we only have people of color, and that's under our race and national origin collection. We have disabilities, where you can voluntarily self-ID, veteran status if you are hired, through one of the different veterans appointments, and I think that's about it. So maybe some parents and caregivers if we look through insurance, but I'm not quite sure it's connected in that way. So my point, I'm going back forward for those of you who slide moving makes me a little queasy sometimes. Right. So when we go to having a data-driven approach, we don't collect very much information about our workforce voluntarily, of course. So we don't know if there's inequities or barriers to the hiring or the promotion of LGBTQ plus employees or professional development or retention. So, it all goes back to collection of demographic data. Is to see about if we can collect demographic information about employees so that we can take an evidenced and informed approach to reducing inequitable barriers in the hiring, promotion, professional development, and retention practices of those many communities. Okay, so we're almost got a little bit through, but implementation of the EO. So this is like, what has Natalie been doing since June 25th, right? Let me tell you. So OMB and OPM are the leads on this EO, and then you can see the other key collaborators, but we meet all the time. And it's a good thing because it's overseen by the Domestic Policy Council at the White House, but we try to stay and produce a coordinated effort because as you all know, a lot of EOs have been coming out, and some of them, we can collaborate and reduce, any kind of redundancies and coordinate our reporting deadlines and things of that nature so that we can reduce the burden on agencies, but at the same time make strides and headways in the areas where we can connect. The key EO deadlines. So agencies have to submit those self-assessments that I talked about 100 days. It's October 4th. So this is not just the DEIA office. Okay. This is coordinated at the agency level, which means the chief of staff of your organization received a letter from the White House asking them to form DEIA implementation teams and to submit this self-assessment by October 4th. I'll talk more about that in a moment. After that, the DEIA Initiative, which is the OMB, EEOC, OPM, DPC, as we're calling ourselves, the DEIA Initiative, we're going to issue a government-wide DEIA strategic plan. So we're going to take some of the information that we learned from those self-assessments and figure out some priorities, best practices. The executive order asks us to put a sexual harassment and workplace safety plan within the DEIA government-wide strategic plan. So there's some things that we have to have in that plan. We're going to look and see where we can provide guidance to federal agencies in that plan. Issue it on November 23rd. That's coming up. That's what I'm doing right now. And then on March 23rd, federal agencies submit agency-specific DEIA strategic plans that align with that government-wide plan. The other thing is that every agency is undergoing their strategic performance, right? So we want to make sure that their DEIA strategic plan is aligned with the government-wide DEI plan, but also with their agency performance plan. And then annually, we will ask agencies to submit progress reports. I'm going to pause for a second because I haven't been looking at the slides. I'm sorry, at the chat to see if there were any questions. I can't seem to scroll as I was before. Has there been any questions? Scrolling down, scrolling down, scrolling down. Okay, I don't think there's anything specific to, oh, my volume may have cut out. I do want to apologize in advance. I live in a rural area. I've cut off all of my things. So if I go in and out, I apologize. I should come right back. All right, I don't see any specific questions about the slides. Oh, wait a minute. So one of the questions was, do we collect gender, male or female? Yes, right now we do collect sex, male or female. What we don't collect is gender identity in any way, shape, or form government-wide. With that, we'll go to the next slide. This was more around for the federal agencies when we were doing the DEIA assessments, what agencies will be asked to do. So we're asking them to look at insights about diversity in their agency's workforce composition and identifying practices that may limit diversity. And we're asking them, again, to assess the current state and effectiveness of their DEIA programs. We're going to take baseline data that we provide them so that they can use it, for their agency-specific data. And we want the secretary or the head of your organization to include a forecast on what they feel as though their DEIA priorities will be, moving forward. And then we collect it in our MAC site. We don't want agencies to duplicate existing reporting channels. So we're trying to minimize those. We don't want them to respond to the same information that they've been doing, for years and years. And we don't want to publish reports. These are not to be FOIable, but they may be subject to FOIA, but we're collecting these to inform the government-wide strategic plan. So one of the things that we asked agencies to do, now this is about a month old presentation. So we were asking agencies before we put out a template, to take a look at your existing workforce and your existing data. I think this is important because, especially for benefits, because even if you're not a DEIA practitioner or EEO or HR, these are some of the documents that help inform, right, the current state of your DEIA. So I just wanted to go through them. I kept the slide in here because I figured, they may want to know what would be a good picture of my organization. So you're at Management Directive 715, which is typically done by your EEO office and reported to the EEOC. Your federally equal employment opportunity recruitment plan is important. And that usually is done by either your human capital or your D&I office. Talks about the recruitment of many communities, how you plan to do that. Your HCOP, right? Your human capital operating plan. All important documents to talk about, how we're going to do something different for the workforce. We ask that they review existing surveys, including FEDS data, which is the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. Any pulse surveys that your organization may have taken, I think over the past few months, a lot of them held listening sessions, right, around the future of work and, the COVID response. All of that data that you've received from your organization or information that you receive from your information is important information to learn about your workforce. Climate assessments, exit surveys, stay surveys, if you do those. All of that information helps to determine, the agency's capacity and potential as they approach to either training its workforce or increasing or advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. As I said before, we are not starting from ground zero. Agencies were asked to submit a 2011 and 2016 diversity and inclusion strategic plans. So we wanted agencies to take a look and say, what went well with those initiatives and see how we can either, transform them or maybe move them to mature your program into something else. Engaging key stakeholders. So a lot of you may be part of D&I councils, employee resource groups, any affinity groups. Affinity groups are like Blacks in Government or Federally Employed Women or Society for American Indian Government Employees, Federal Asian Pacific American Council, FAPAC. So LULAC, all of those are affinity groups to begin discussions around how employees would like to contribute to this initiative. And I'll be talking about that. As I said, the letter from the White House went out, I think, on August 3rd to Chief of Staff asking them to create DEIA implementation teams that were way broader than just the EEO office or the Chief Diversity Officer or the Chief Human Capital Officer. Why? Because again, this EO requires a whole of organization effort. And so we ask that the agency teams include your agency equity teams from the EO 13985. We ask that you include your CFO, your budget office, your general counsel, your strategic performance or performance management office, your D&I council lead, an ERG lead, chief diversity officer, ECO, EEO, everyone that would have, from the top has to have has to be a key driver of this initiative in your organization so that we understand the priorities, right, and the agency level context of it all. So here's the best part. Here's where I talk about what you can do. How does this EO apply to you? Okay? So here's what we advise federal agencies. There's we look at lots of different models in diversity and inclusion and equity and accessibility around academia. And so one of them is another private company called Accenture. In their Getting to Equal, they put this out, and I said, this is what the federal government needs to hear. Leading DEIA, meaning it's what you say, it's what you do, and it's what you drive. Okay? And so what do I mean by say? Say means be a voice to leading and committing to DEIA. Do. Be an active contributor in championing DEIA. And drive. You have to be invested in this, in the driving and sustaining of DEIA. And so leading DEIA is not, I sit on this work group. Okay. It's what you say, it's what you do, it's what you drive. I'm passionate about making sure that our workforce is open to many communities participating, and that the service that we provide to America is to many communities, right? Say it. How do you do it? You do it by sitting on those working groups and those committees, but you volunteer to be the president. All of those things. How you drive it is in your everyday conversations with your work, your work teams. How do we drive and sustain it? How do we practice, cultural communication? How do we practice using pronouns? How do we practice, being good stewards of the government's time? So it's really a whole of organization, whole of person effort to lead DEIA. It's a shared responsibility. It's not just your agency head's responsibility. It's not just, my manager should do that. No, it's everyone has a responsibility for DEIA. But you're right, the roles do vary. So what I or you would do as an individual employee versus what a responsible management official versus what an agency head would do looks a little bit different, right? Hold on. All right. Everybody wants a copy of my slides. For those of you just joining us, a copy of the slides will be provided after this presentation, and it will be in the registration portal. So we're going to get them to you. All right. So what I've done over the next few slides is really synthesize what DEIA looks like at multiple levels. So again, these are not exhaustive. This is just an example for us to share in this conversation so that we kind of get a feel of what it would look like. So for individuals, every individual in the workplace, right? How do I contribute, right, to people, culture, and mission? So when we talked about people, remember, it was the DEIA, people and culture. So that's diversity and inclusion, equity for those things, and accessibility. And then mission is what we do for how do we keep this thing going? How do we make sure that it happens in the services and things that we deliver? So for the individual, what you can do if you want it to be a part of DEIA and have impact in your organization, volunteer for agency outreach and recruitment efforts. Over at NASA, they're doing a really cool thing with their recruitment. It's not avant-garde, but it's refreshing, if not. So when they have a vacancy, just as normal, it's posted on USA Jobs. But if you go on like LinkedIn or those kind of like social sites, they'll have like a person who works at NASA who has the job that they're currently has a vacancy announcement out for, talking about what they do in their regular clothes, in their regular work situation. And that's promoting, right? What they do. It's a volunteer from the agency. It's a great outreach and recruitment effort because it allows individuals to see exactly what that job is like from, not a movie star or an actor, but what a regular federal employee looks like and does. And I think it's been a great connector, right, for their organization because people are like, oh, that's what it is. It's not just reading the words on the paper and saying, that's what I can do. It's saying, this is what this person does. And it makes like a connection, a human connection with the job that's available, right? So volunteer, that's one way. Some of you may have participated when we were going to recruitment fairs or career days and things of that nature, volunteering for agency outreach and recruitment efforts. I want to give you an example. Culture. How do I build culture in an organization? Participate in employee resource groups. There are many and varied types of employee resource groups. I think USPTO probably has 40 different ERGs around all different types of things that go on, different communities in their culture, different technical areas. All of those things help to build culture in an organization. So participate as an individual in your volunteer time. You can participate in an ERG. The last thing is contribute to ideas or create or augment agencies, programs, and initiatives. So if maybe not in what you do every day, but you know what, that team does something that really affects the community where I live at, and if they would do it maybe in this manner or say it in this way or change how they deliver it a little bit, might be more receptive to my community. Those kind of tips, those kinds of ideas are invaluable, right, to our success in making sure that we equitably distribute or provide services to our communities. That's a great way to contribute to a mission-based exercise, even if it's not, your everyday daytime job. So individuals can have the most impact in people, culture, and mission by volunteering, participating, and contributing to ideas. In that same vein, we give examples of if you're a part of an EEO office, how you're, when they conduct barrier analysis and identify workforce gaps, how they provide observances, programs, and initiatives, based upon what they find in that barrier analysis. And then ask that, they align any special emphasis program activities with agency priorities to make sure that it also, again, reaches any community. DEIA practitioners, right? We have a lot in people, culture, and mission. We ask that they really go beyond. So EEO has some statutory categories of things that they, must oversee for compliance, right? When it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, there's some broader dimensions that can be looked at. Diversity of thought, generational diversity, intersectionality. All of those things in collaboration with HR and EO to develop strategies to make sure that those many communities, again, are advancing in the workplace. Culture. Build those, like I said, that comprehensive DEIA education program. We have to build awareness and competency around issues, skills, and guidance. And then we ask that DEIA professionals also assess whether agency policies and actions create or exacerbate barriers to full and equal participation by all individuals. So, that's a little bit beyond what the EEO stats from the law says, but it doesn't mean they can't work hand in hand to make sure that all the communities are reviewed, right, for inequity. Managers and supervisors. This one I love because I do think that most of even if it's just a perception of whether or not things are diverse, equitable, inclusive, or accessible, really begin and end, with that employee supervisor relationship. And so for supervisors, we ask that we proactively monitor where opportunities exist to diversify the workforce. So that's the way we can work on our people. Culture, intentionally display. Let me go back to that word. Intentionally display inclusive behaviors and leverage diverse teams for better decision making. I'm guilty of it. I work on it every day. First of all, let's talk about that. This is a journey, right? It takes daily growth from individuals to make the organization grow. So it's real easy to always say, Sarah can do it, because Sarah can do it, right? But if we let Sarah do it every time, we never will know the capabilities of Tom. And so I really encourage the leveraging the diverse teams, leveraging the unique talents of everyone on the team, right? Is key to that intentional, inclusive behavior display. I think there's a lot of us in the federal workforce that just disconnect because they're not always recognized, appreciated, valued, or feel that way. It's not that they're not. They don't feel like they're recognized, valued, and appreciated. So if we in that manager, supervisor, employee relationship can build that connection and leverage teams for better decision making, I think it's one of the key ways to making sure that our workplaces are more inclusive. And then support and implement strategies and actions in the DEIA strategic plan. How many managers and supervisors know what's in an agency DEIA strategic plan? Right, I'm gonna let that sit in. Not very many, because their focus is on their people and their mission. But if we don't understand the agency priorities and how our people and our mission connect to those things, it's probably why sometimes we don't score as high on those FEVS surveys and things of that nature. So we really want to make sure that we're connecting, all the things that we're actually doing, our initiatives and our programs, right, with our everyday behavior in the workplace to make sure that they all align with our agency priority to advance DEIA. Senior leaders. Senior leaders support the people, support agency-wide efforts to build and retain a diverse and qualified workforce, right? What can they do? Communicate, right? It's nice to get the letter every year with your D&I or your EEO statement, but it's more impactful when the weekly and daily or the communication, the way that your organization lead communicates with your organization, talks about the priorities, talks about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility as a routine conversation with the workplace about their growth and their journey, right? And so we want to make sure that our senior leaders are promoting our DEIA efforts, right? And then lastly, proactively monitor any organizational challenges and regularly communicate agency DEIA policies and practices. So over the last few slides, I kind of went over how everyone has a responsibility for DEIA. The roles may vary a little bit These are not exhaustive. Again, these are examples of ways that individuals, your EEO office, your D&I practitioners, your ERGs, your senior leaders can engage in DEIA to advance DEIA in your organization. So for the next few moments, I want to go through the chat, scrolling down so I can see everybody. The presentation, did it unfreeze? I hope so. I want everyone to open up the chat feature. So if you go in the top of your screen, I'm sorry, not the chat, I keep saying that. In the Q&A feature, if you can scroll down and open it up, it's at the top of your screen. It has a question mark inside two like thought bubbles. That'll open up, I think, your Q&A and type it in. What are some ways that you can lead DEIA from where you are? You could give me some insights to some of the things that you're doing as a benefits officer, ways that you would be able to, lead DEIA from where you are. And I'm scrolling down, Patricia. I had a hard time before. It won't let me grab the button on my screen. So I'm going to open it up and I'm going to close it again to see if it will refresh. Oh, it looks like I had to refresh. There's a whole lot of things that I didn't see in the chat. Nope. Well, I hope for those of you that looks like you lost sound early on that you received it back. Oh, okay. I have a couple of things that I can see now. All right. So one of the participants says we have a newly formed DEIA committee and we are trying to figure out what our objectives will be. That is excellent. I encourage individuals to participate in all of those DEIA future of work conversations. We will establish government-wide priorities that will be helpful. But I want everyone to keep in mind that we really, really, really need to think about our own cultures as well. How do we fit into, how does that work for us? Because there's a lot of initiatives and we want the workforce to embrace them all, but they kind of have to be tailored. The same thing that's the Smithsonian is like an art education culture. Think about NIH, that's scientists, labs, and things of that nature. It's different communities. You really how you communicate some of these initiatives and strategies and priorities and how you connect your workforce to them is really individualistic. And so it's good that you be a part of the communities to really do that. Being open and sharing with employees about their options. Yes, I do think that as benefits officers, we all have our own personal opinions and our views and our life choices and all of that. But individuals who come to you usually are coming for some counsel, right, around benefits or options and resources. And sometimes they may share about why they need or want those resources. And so, being open and sharing what you can provide to all people from all communities is definitely a way that you can lead D&I from where you are. Another way, being mindful of pronouns, saying spouse instead of wife or husband. Let me share. Been a D&I practitioner for 15 years, equity, accessibility, all of that. I realized that guess what I say all the time? You guys, you guys, you guys. And so I told myself, every time I say you guys, I'm going to pinch my finger. And I've been working on it. I still mess up sometimes. But it's just one of those, and I don't mean to minimize this statement. What I'm saying is it's an everyday effort to change something, right? And so as you do that, you'll continue to want to do it and be an inspiration to others as you're doing it. No one's going to get this perfect overnight. I sometimes mess up other people's pronouns, but I proactively try not to. And that's, effort. it's appreciated by individuals who are a same-sex couple or have a partnership or whatever word, instead of the traditional wife-husband. So kudos to you. Expand recruitment efforts. I feel like we have been talking about recruitment in the federal government for how many years, right? So when we say expand recruitment efforts, yes, expand recruitment efforts. We have traditional relationships with our HBCUs and our MSIs and our technical colleges like the Rochester Institute for Technology, the National Institute for the Deaf, and things of that, the schools for the blind. We've had traditional relationships with vocational rehabs. We've had traditional relationships with veterans organizations. That has yielded us where we are, right? So we have to expand our recruitment efforts, which is digging deeper into those established relationships, right? And trying to find new ones. Going to, religious minorities and saying, have you heard of USA Jobs, right? Taking steps to figure out how could we expand our employment opportunities for formerly incarcerated individuals. Really going beyond what has been our comfort level when it talks about dealing with all levels of the community and really expanding how we recruit into the federal government. So it's not just who we recruit to, but how we recruit and looking at, are there any barriers, to applying to a federal job? Figuring out new mission and vision statements to be more inclusive, hopefully, or talk about equity and advancing equity, or the priorities around those things are great. So present benefits training to the LGBTQ community, specifically outline benefits that pertain to some of the needs they may be aware of, be unaware that are available. Great initiative. There are multiple, I think we've learned over time that, I think many communities in the federal workforce could benefit from things like taking advantage of TSP in a different way. Some of us retire with no money in our TSP, and some retire with great wealth. We all have the option to opt in, but if you're not from a community where that's something that you are traditionally used to doing or don't take advantage of it, you just don't. So expanding, the education around what is available to many communities is a great way to lead D&I from where you are. I hope you're able to hear me. I know it looks like the sound is cutting out, and I apologize if it's on my end. Set aside time for special events. Block a time away from the hustle of day-to-day work. Being a part of a work community takes effort. So let me give you a brief example. My previous director came on board about 2.5 years ago, and she noticed that we were a group of what you would call independent individual doers, right? We like to get our task, go do it, and come back, right? And so she instituted something called Brainstorm Thursday. And every week she would call on somebody, and they would be their project, and then would be the topic for Brainstorm Thursday. And this is where basically your teammates get to pick apart your work. And at first we were like, I didn't ask their opinion. I didn't want this. But what we learned, remember, we are the DEIA office, right? Right? Where many opinions, ideas, and should be appreciated and valued. And so I just want to put that out there, because in the beginning, we were resistant and hesitant and didn't want to set aside time, right, for the development of our product, right, to be more broad and it had many views into it. But once we did, oh my goodness, the products we created together were amazing and way better than what we were doing as individuals, right? Here's the thing. It also built team because now you have to trust that the person who is critiquing you over time is doing so to build a better product. And so we were able as a team to come together even in a different way. I would say people who met us 3 years ago were like, oh yeah, they have a great working together. The team works good. After Brainstorm Thursdays took hold, it took a little bit of time. I would say it took about 6 to 8 weeks of us being like, she's crazy. Why is she doing this? Once we got into doing it and understood that everybody was going to get their turn at Brainstorm Thursday, we were like, oh no, this makes it a lot better. And so I'm focusing on, the setting aside the time for special events, but setting aside time for team building, culture building, in alignment with your everyday work. It doesn't have to be something separate, but those moments helped us learn people's strengths. The things that, there's a person on my team, I tease her all the time. I'm like, you're just not like me. And she's not. That's the cool part, right? She has a different way of looking at everything that we put together. But if I didn't have it, I wouldn't connect to somebody in the community that thinks like she does, right? And so it is essential to set aside time for specialists. And working from home, there's a lot of virtual trainings going on right now. Consistent, I'm not saying take a whole bunch of trainings offline. What I'm saying is within your work, set aside time for special events from the hustle and bustle of every day to work on improvement of you and your team. Yes, that's a great way to lead DEIA. DEIA, sorry. Putting your pronouns on emails in your signature blocks. To be clear, a lot of organizations have what I've learned are style manuals, typically out of your communications office, that dictate, for lack of a better word, what your signature block can and cannot have. And a lot of those are being reviewed to include pronouns. If you're wondering, why, or there's definitely, I Google why should I use pronouns in the workplace, and you will get all the information that you need about the correct way to identify individuals. And so I do encourage, that is a great way to lead DEIA in the workplace. Scrolling down because we don't have much more time. Support by team members who may be in one of the communities mentioned and promote awareness of equity and engagement of all people and cultures. That is a great way to lead DEIA. And by support your team members, I wonder if you, Amy, if you have time, and I can scroll down, what do you mean by support your team members? I think, and I share that because I know a lot of people need tactical. They really need hands-on options when it comes to what does support mean. So one of those may be attend an ERG session on, how to invest differently in TSB. Another one may be, it's lots of different ways. I'm trying to think of one really quick. Participate in cultural awareness events, attend that DEIA training program, mentor, right? Someone else in of a different community. There's lots of different ways that you can support team members who may be in a community. If you know someone is trying to get a promotion, say, hey, let me review that resume with you and see, I was able to get promoted when I did this. Sharing information about how to do certain things and being open and willing to help your team members is also a great way. Given the environment and culture of government, what levels of implementation do you expect? What levels of implementation do you expect? I'm trying to read the question. Yes, so let me read it a little better. The USA Jobs Assessment Test can discourage a lot of people of color from applying in the federal government. What is the plan around that? That has come up in other engagements like this one. We've been doing a lot of stakeholder engagement, so I'm going to pause on that. The White House mandated EEOC, OPM, OMB to go out and share this EO with everyone. They wanted the community to be aware. So, what I'm doing today, I'll be doing it tomorrow and the next day, to make sure that all communities are aware of the EO and their role in it. And so, yes, it has come up a couple of times that, not just the USA Jobs Assessment, but the assessments in general and how some of them may or may not discourage people from applying or have I think it was a bias to the ratings of the assessments and who gets selected or who doesn't. And so I do know we've taken that back to our team here at OPM to say, is this a barrier to the inclusion of many cultures into the federal workforce? So I don't have an answer. I'm not sure if I have a name there, anonymous, but I will say it is something that we have taken into account. What levels of implementation do you expect? So we expect every organization to participate. I think there's 73, don't quote me on that number, organizations that are required by the EO to submit self-assessments. So we're starting with that. Actually today, we asked that agencies submit their best practices. Like we gave them a template and said, if you're using these best practices to submit a survey online so that we could get an overview of what agencies' DEIA programs are currently using, or not, to gauge, some of the priorities that we would have in this government-wide strategic plan. So levels of expectation are a whole of organization. We expect your, CFO, your BEO, your budget office, all of those things. Your procurement office, right? If you're procurement services, are you doing that in a way that is equitable and barrier-free to participation by many communities? Everything that we're doing, how can we advance equity in the doing of it for the workforce and for the American people? I think that summarizes, a lot in a large document. So I don't want to, make light of it, but it's the executive order really details everyone's responsibility in it. And so the question is what levels of implementation, I'm the DEIA person. I expect everyone to be involved, every person in an organization. Might not be realistic. I get that. But if that's the only way I feel as though we're going to see program maturity is when individuals in the workplace can see themselves in the priorities of their organization and how they attach to it or they can connect to it for the outcome that's mission-based. I do feel as though that's the way that everyone will be able to see themselves in it. Building partnerships. All right, well, I don't want to belabor. We have a couple of things here. Expanding recruitment, coming down, making sure that people are aware of their benefits, being an active team member. Yes, I think that's great. I have one more slide here. Oh, hold on, I have to put it back up. I connected with Benjamin Amos here at OPM, who said, if you want individuals to know how they at OPM can help advance and lead DEIA, OPM's Retirement Services is working with benefit officers and benefit staff across government, right, on a project for their Executive Order 13985, and that's advancing racial equity, the one that we talked about. How do we help for the federal, sorry, not for the federal government, for the American government, people that we serve. They want to form a working group of benefit officers and staff interested in DEIA efforts across government to discuss how to improve federal employee retirement readiness. See, I was talking about that. So it's voluntary and the time commitment is up to the individual. But if you're interested, and I think everyone here should be interested, we ask that you email benjamin.amos amos@opm.gov. And that's the way that you, as an individual, can help advance DEIA, to be one way, to be a part of this working group. And with that, I just want to say that we do have, and this will be in the slides, we have come up with some resources for the community around the implementation of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So this may not be your task in your organization, but you're free to go to our MAX site. We have a learning community on a multitude of topics. Like our next one is on data on September 7th, and looking at how to use data for barrier analysis or to seek barriers, and so, or barrier removal. And so, if that interests you and you want to learn more about it, we have some other upcoming topics like on how to engage with underserved communities. We have topics on the Chief Diversity Officer. They're all up and coming. So if you would like to be a part of that learning community, you can go to our MAX page and participate at your will in some of our learning webinars, and they're scheduled all at different times throughout the week. This is new, so we're just getting started. Work with us as we work out some of the kinks. Anything about DEIA EO implementation, we've set up a website for the implementation teams to send, an inbox for our implementation teams at askdeia@opm.gov to send us an email and get a response quickly. We have a one-pager that, identifies all the different sections of the EO, kind of like a little cheat sheet if you wanted to take a look at it. And then we also have our equity EO implementation MAX page. So there's different things. We have 2 different learning communities, but intertwined pretty much around equity. So all of those are links that once you get the slides, you'll be able to take a look at. Stay connected. I encourage you to, this is not a one-time thing. I tell people this is not a sprint. This is a long marathon. And so over time, more resources will be coming out. We are encouraging you to participate as you can in your organizations, volunteer when you can, and really just stay engaged and involved. I appreciate your time today. We went through, let me see if I have any more questions here at the end. I tried to answer many of them as we were going along. Some people in our department are having issues that are not being addressed. What is that about? So I would say that you have to really be strategic and tactful when it comes to individuals, and how to address some issues. Some issues can be tackled, very openly, and transparency is important, but we have to make sure that we don't, infringe upon people's privacy and rights at the same time. And so, if things are not being addressed or you perceive that they're not being addressed, I suggest you engage with management. I'm a federal employee, so I know that's not easy with some management teams. But individuals should have ways to address multiple things. And so I encourage you to participate in all the processes when they ask for volunteers, join, so that your voice is heard. When they ask for listening sessions, talk about it, even if it's anonymously, right? So that your organization has some awareness of some of these issues. I don't know if I have another question, but with that, I think, hold on, I'm trying to navigate the screen. Could you send us a link to get all the slideshows? I don't know how many slideshows, maybe you mean from the whole event. So I think the right answer to get the slides is to go back to your registration portal. They're not posted there yet. I'm going to send them following our presentation. So they should be there hopefully tomorrow, or if not the next day. But that's where this slideshow will be. I'm not sure about all the other ones. Someone says I'm bubbly and inviting. Exciting. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to end today's presentation. You can contact me at diversityandinclusion@opm.gov if you have any to say hi, Natalie, or this email is for Natalie, and I will receive it and be able to respond to you. So diversity and inclusion at opm.gov. I hope this was helpful for everyone today and you have a better understanding of the DEIA-EO, our implementation next steps, as well as how well you see yourself in this. Bye.